I want to conclude our luncheon with some remarks about what HACR has been seeing in the field of corporate America, where we were, where we are, where we're going, and what HACR needs to do in partnership with all of you. Let me first start with a message of thanks for many of you who not only are our corporate partners, all of you who are here, those that have been watching virtually, as well as our more than 115 corporate partners who have joined us in this movement to advance Hispanic inclusion in corporate America. So first, my thanks to you. So give yourselves a big applause. But I also want to state the obvious. We know that HACR has been around since 1986, 36 years of advancing Hispanic inclusion. We're so proud that our symposium is now in our 30th year as we continue to have programs where we make sure that we are talking about what are those best practices that we need to do. But as you know, HACR is not just a symposium organization or an executive programs. We are at this 365 days out of the year. And it's so critically important to think about where we were, because back in 1986, when we were started by our coalition board of directors, we knew that the numbers were extremely poor. And yes, 36 years later, we have seen more representation on corporate boards. We have seen more representation of C-suite and CEOs. We have been seeing that number grow. However, stating the obvious, only 4% of Latinos are serving on Fortune 500 corporate boards. Only 1% of Latinas are serving on corporate boards. And if you take the top 3 positions, the 3 reporting levels leading up to the CEO, there is no more than 6%. And when you go down beyond the Fortune 500, the numbers actually go down. And so the work that we do in partnership with stakeholders like you is so critically important, because while we're proud of the fact that we have 115 partners who believe that together we are making a movement, there are still 6,000 publicly traded companies that have yet, many of whom have yet to even take that first step. Many companies that have not even selected a chief diversity officer. Many companies that haven't even started ERG groups or BRG groups. Many companies who still have not yet made that decision to recognize the power of Hispanic inclusion. And so what is HACR doing, and how can you help us and be a part of this movement? Well, I'll first start with a story. You see, many of you may have heard this story. If you haven't, you're hearing it for the very first time. 4 years ago, I attended the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, except I was not invited. I did not have an invitation. And in fact, for those of you that have been to Davos, I actually made the mistake of staying on the wrong side of the mountain. So if you've been to Davos and you see that big mountaintop, I made the mistake of staying on the other side of it. But why? Because we knew that we have to be at the table of inclusion when we are discussing important topics that relate to our community and many of our diversity stakeholders, our partners in the Black and Asian American and women, LGBTQ, and so many of our partner organizations and communities that need to be present. And so, for lack of a better word, I crashed Davos. But thank goodness I did. Because now fast forward almost 5 years later, not only has HACR had a permanent presence at a conference like Davos, but we have taken that Davos strategy elsewhere around the country and quite frankly, even around the world. And why would HACR go to the other side of the pond to promote Hispanic inclusion? Well, the answer to that goes to what happened when I went back the second time and third time and fourth time, and how I opened my speech when we were there this past May. And this is how I started. Every company thinks about their globalization strategy, that globalization budget. Well, what if I named you a country on the planet Earth, a country that is the 7th largest economy in the world, that is dollar denominated so you don't have currency risk, that is AAA rated so you don't have credit default risk, that is in a strong regulatory environment so you don't have regulatory risks, that is English dominant, that is the 2nd largest Spanish speaking country in the world, that has an average age of 28, a mode age of 11, and growing faster than every single G20 country in the world. Would you take your globalization dollars and invest it in that country? Of course, everyone says, my goodness, which country is it? Is it the UK? Is it India? Is it South Korea? No, it's the US Latino community. That is our power. That is the power of inclusion. That is the fact that we are not just an American economic force. We are a global economic force. And if you look at the research that just came out only a few days ago from our partners at the Latino Donor Collaborative, it confirmed what I shared in Davos, because we were the 7th largest economy in the world, but today we are now the 5th largest economy in the world. So what does that mean in terms of action and results? This is why the work that we do, including the work with our HACR Corporate Inclusion Index, working with our partners at the Alliance for Board Diversity, which includes the Executive Leadership Council, Catalyst, Leadership Education for Asian Pacifics, in partnership with Diversified Search. And we put together a research report that's called Missing Pieces that we do in partnership with Deloitte. But here's a kicker that's even more important when you really think about digesting in these numbers. When you think about the power of Latina inclusion, it's compelling. Because Latinas, you by yourselves would be a G20 country. Because if you were to desegregate the numbers of all the statistics that we see, we know that Latinos are probably somewhere between the 11th and 13th largest economy in the world. And yet, despite that, we've only had 2 Latinas ever serve as a Fortune 500 CEO. Less than 1% are serving on corporate boards. And even today, among the 6,000 publicly traded companies, there is no Latinas that are serving. We had 2 and we're now back down to 0. And so that means, what must we do in order to do that? So step 1 is understanding that we've been talking about the business case for years. But you can't talk about the business case without talking about acculturation. Because we believe at HACR that it is acculturation, not assimilation, when it comes to advancing Hispanic inclusion. It means that corporate America must acculturate to our community, not asking us to leave our Latinidad at the door when we go into those doors and into the C-suites. And then there is the importance of being at the seat of the tables, making sure that we have a seat at the table. I'm so proud that our HACR team this year has doubled down on diversity at many of these gatherings. This January, 5 years ago, we crashed Davos. This January, we will be bringing the largest team of HACR ever, and we will probably be the largest diversity-focused nonprofit present at the World Economic Forum this January, and you're going to see that we're doubling down on Davos. But why is this so important to be in not only important in gatherings like Davos, but why is it so important that we must continue to be present wherever the CEOs are there? I'm so thankful for many of your companies and many of your CEOs. Many of you have interacted with me. I'll give you one example. Our co-sponsor, Target Corporation, Brian Cornell, the CEO, invited me to Minneapolis and said, "Cid, how can I help you?" And I said, "Mr. Cornell, can you share with us where do you go to have your gatherings so that we can be at the table?" And thanks to Brian Cornell, that helped us engage with organizations like the Retail Industry Leaders Conference, where many of the retail CEOs attend. Certainly, a big thanks for our other co-host sponsor, that CEO, Ramon LaGuarta at PepsiCo, who I'm happy that I've met over 10 times since he has been CEO. And that's unprecedented to give us that amount of time, but that commitment to saying you should be present at whether it's our beverage association gatherings, whether it's being present at these other industry gatherings, thinking about so many of our partners, and then I can just go on and on with names. Brian Moynihan at Bank of America, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase, Julie Sweet at Accenture, and so many, Carol Tomey at UPS. I can just go on and on. So many of your CEOs that have been supportive of this movement. But we know that that's out of over 6,000 publicly traded companies, 18,000 private companies, large private companies, that we know it is important that we continue to have that movement, because we know that the corporate culture starts at the very top and having those engagements. Because at HACR, we're going to plan to achieve, but we're going to dare to exceed when it comes to inclusion, so that great results we will see as we start seeing the numbers in the years to come. We dare to exceed when we're going to be at the Milken Institute Global Summit again for the second time after we were there for the first time this past May. We dare to exceed to be present where companies often don't think we would ever step foot. 3 weeks ago, I was at the Code Conference. We were the only diversity organization present, and multiple Silicon Valley CEOs were there, where we were able to talk about the importance of inclusion in Silicon Valley. We know that there are many others, whether it's Aspen Ideas, whether it's the Sun Valley Conference that happens every July, the Jackson Hole Summit that happens every August, the Consumer Electronics Show, South by Southwest, the Business Roundtable, where we are so proud that we've actually been building a strong relationship with the Business Roundtable, and so many of you that helped us to make that connection. But we know we have more work to do. We know that, number one, we need to do this together. We need to be able to lock arms together, march together, sing hymns together, yell C-step where they're together, so that corporate America recognizes the global power of Hispanic inclusion. Because it's not just the power of Hispanic inclusion here in the US. We know that every single company around the world knows that the power of Hispanic inclusion is global. So what can we do to make that difference? Number one, let this momentum not be the end of this experience at the HACR Symposium. Take this back to your companies. Take this back to the community. Think about those servers who were here serving us, our housekeepers that have been servicing our rooms, our farm workers, and many community leaders who dream that one day they or their children can be just like you, to be that voice. And when you are at that table, always say presente. even if you are the only person in that room. But we also know we need more allies. So how do we make sure that we are cultivating allyship so that when we are not at the room, someone says, where are Latinos? Why are we not there? And we must stand for our African American and Asian American and LGBTQ and women, brothers and sisters, so that if we are in the room and there's no one from those communities that are in the room, that we must say, why are there no blacks in this room or only Latinos? Why are there no Asian Americans or LGBT in the room? We are in this together because we know that certainly our community is diverse. I'm a proud Dominicano, Afro-Latino that brings my full self into the workplace. And I want everyone to do the same thing. And that's why we know that for 2023, HACR is making big plans that we will be sure to be visible, working with our media partners, including CNBC, including the Wall Street Journal. Hope everyone saw that HACR was in Forbes magazine just last month, thanks to our partners at Bank of America and PepsiCo and Chevron for your support in making sure that 1.4 million people read The Power of Hispanic Inclusion. Working with USA Today and so many of our partners, working with the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, working with so many partners because we know that we won't be able to do this alone. But that's why I want everyone to recognize that we can make a difference. I want us to, when we come back for our 40th anniversary of our HACR Symposium, to say, yo recuerdo cuando teníamos el 30 aniversario from the HACR Symposium, and look where we were in the year 2022, and now look where we are now in 2032. I don't want to look back and say, here we were in 2022 compared to where we were in 2012, and the numbers just barely moved. But it's going to take all of us together. Let's be partners. Let's be stakeholders. Let's be active. Let's be vocal. Porque juntos podemos, si se puede, mi gente. And so that's why I'm so proud to be the president and CEO for HACR. So proud of having an amazing team who's dedicated every single day. So proud of our coalition board of directors. So proud of our partners, stakeholders in our community and our partnerships. And so that's why I want everyone to recognize that the time is now. I don't want to hear about where we're going to be by 2030, 2040. I want to know where we're going to be by 2023, 2024, 2025, because the time is now to make that move. And so that's why we're so proud of our partners. But let's also use this to elevate not only what we're doing to those companies that have not yet come to the table, but also continue to make sure that we are bringing our community where we come from. And so it is so important. So I just want to say, again, how thankful I am for all of you for being champions. I want to thank every single one of you. I want to thank every single company that is a corporate member of HACR. And I also want to thank our stakeholders because the time is now. And just wait to see what we have in store for 2023. What we have in store to stand by our chief diversity officers who work so hard to make sure that we're bringing diversity and inclusion, making sure that it is not just a checkbox, it is a business strategy, making sure that every single gathering that all of us estamos presente, and every single time we get that microphone, we make sure that we are vocal, we say, si se puede, as Dolores Huerta would say. And so that's why we are so excited for what we have lying ahead. And I'm just so thankful. So with that, thank you all so much. And we are going to continue doing great things together. Muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes. We're going to make a difference. We're going to be active. We're going to march. We're going to lock arms. We're going to shake hands. We're going to say, we shall overcome and si se puede. Thank you all very, very much.